Welcome to part 3 of the English settlement of the New World. Now we're going to look at the trials of Jamestown. Often when we think of the settlers of Jamestown, the first person that pops in our mind is this guy, John Smith, right? And we have that vision like Disney's Pocahontas. As you can see by this picture, he looks nothing like the Disney portrayal, not even close. And in fact, John Smith, when they first arrived to the North American shores, he wasn't even in charge. Matter of fact, he was under arrest. He was in the brig for, well, supposedly inciting a mutiny, right? Christopher Newport, who was leading the expedition, accused him of that. And in fact, he may have ended up getting executed for mutiny were it not for the fact that when they broke the charter for the colony, it had a list of governors, a list of people that would form the leadership of this new colony, and John Smith's name was on that list. Now, the first president of Jamestown is going to be Edward Wingfield. He is going to be elected the first president. John Smith will be later, right? Now, when we hear the story of John Smith, the other thing that we often hear is about his famous interactions with Pocahontas, right? Or to give her her proper name, Matoka. That was her actual name, right? She goes through several name changes over time here, right? Now, again, often when we think about that, we have a tendency to think of the Disney version of it, and, well, it's not really like that at all. First of all, no love interests here. Okay, Pocahontas is 12 at the time that John Smith is in Jamestown, so ew, okay, we're not going to do that. That's the first thing. Second thing is that the story of him being saved, right? I've got some issues with this story of him being saved by Pocahontas, and here's the reason why. First of all, we know for a fact that he was captured by the Powhatan Indians while exploring the Chickahominy River. That is verifiable. That's got corroboration. He was off on basically a scouting mission and was captured, right? Then we also know that he returned back to Jamestown later. He got free, right? And that from that point forward, there's good relations, at least for the time that John Smith was there, with the Powhatan Indians, right? Now, what he says, everything between those two times is his story. The only source from it is his. Now, according to him, he was captured, he was bounded, he was about to be executed when Pocahontas came running out and went, "Daddy, Daddy, please don't kill him," right? And Chief Powhatan went, "Oh, daughter," and let him go. And right, that's the story he tells them, right? Here's the problem I have with the story. Aside from the only source being John Smith, according to John Smith, that's the second time that's happened to him. See, he's Captain John Smith, but that's an Army rank, not a naval rank. And there's another account of him being captured in 1602 while fighting the Turks in modern-day Turkey, right, in Anatolia, right, where he was captured. He was about to be executed in front of the Sultan when the Sultan's daughter ran out, draped herself over him, and went, "Daddy, Daddy, please don't kill him." And the Sultan went, "Oh, daughter," and let him go. You mean to tell me, I mean, he's rocking the beard. I'll give him that. You got to respect the dude who rocks the beard. I'm not saying. But you mean to tell me that he is so charismatic that he pulled that stunt off twice? I'm not buying it. Now, he will eventually become president of Jamestown in September of 1608, right? And he will implement a policy especially for these wannabe gentlemen who just don't want to blister their hands. They've never handled anything harsher than a bar of soap. And he says, "No, you don't work, you don't eat," right? But then he won't stay much longer after that because he'll get caught up in 1609, on October of 1609. He'll be badly injured in a mysterious gunpowder explosion, and because of his injuries, he'll be forced to return to England there in the fall of 1609. And really, it's just in time because the winter of 1609 is going to be horrible and almost terminal for Jamestown. The crops that were planted in 1609 yielded a very mediocre harvest in that fall. And the supply ships that had arrived had brought some supplies, but they had also brought a lot more mouths to feed. You have more people. Matter of fact, you're up to 214 settlers at this point. And so when winter set in 1609, in 1610, it's going to be a horrible winter. Matter of fact, ultimately they're going to refer to it as starving time, right? Those who survived will end up eating leather, rats, snakes, anything they could get their hands on, right? Settlers would go through and raid Native American villages to get food. The relationships between the Powhatans and the Jamestown settlers will completely fall apart, right? Matter of fact, if you went outside by yourself, you ran pretty good risk of getting killed. And John Percy, who will be the president of Jamestown now that John Smith is gone, will describe it in his writings. He'll say that Indians killed as fast without the fort as famine and pestilence did within. So he said if you went outside the fort, the odds are you were going to die, right? So it's going to be a horrible winter. Of the 214 settlers, only 60 of them are going to survive. 154 of them are going to die. They are going to have to survive by raiding Indian villages and doing even worse things. They're going to resort to cannibalism just to survive. Again, John Percy writes about this. He says, "Then having fed upon the horses and other beasties as long as they had lasted, we were glad to make shift with vermin as dogs, cats, rats, and mice." He said men began digging up the dead corpses out of the graves and eating them. Others licked up the blood that had fallen from their weak fellows. The bodies of Indians had been killed and would be eaten. He reported one settler had killed his wife and powdered her up to eat her, for which he was burned. But many besides fed on the corpses of the dead men, and one who had gotten unsatiable out of custom of that food was executed for it. The colony is this close to completely falling apart, right? Matter of fact, the remaining settlers, when the spring of 1610 rolls around, are absolutely ready to leave. They have every intention of abandoning the site. And if it wasn't for the ships arriving that spring, having some specifically very important leaders like Lord de la Warre, who will become the new president of Jamestown, and John Rolfe, who will introduce a commercial profitable farming crop, I think Jamestown probably would have disappeared altogether. Now, Lord de la Warre will reestablish order in Jamestown by implementing a lot of John Smith policies, like if you want to eat, you better work. But John Rolfe is the one that's going to have the major impact here, because he is going to be coming from the Caribbean, and he's going to bring with him tobacco seeds, right? Now, tobacco farming was already being done in the Virginia area. The Algonquin had been farming tobacco, but it was a rather pungent, nasty tobacco that was being produced there, while the Caribbean tobacco was smooth, being produced by the Spanish. It was all the rage by this point back in Europe, right? And so what John Rolfe did is he brought the Caribbean tobacco and he cross-pollinated it with the Virginia tobacco to create a tobacco that was smooth like the Caribbean tobacco, but hardy enough to survive the Virginia climate. This is going to start making Virginia, at least for individuals, Jamestown is going to start becoming successful, right? Now, he also meets Pocahontas. Matter of fact, Pocahontas is going to be kidnapped in 1612 and brought to Jamestown. John Rolfe had been there for about 2 years by this point, right? But rather than return her, as she was initially supposed to be ransomed, she's going to stay. Right? She's going to learn English. She's going to convert to Christianity. In April of 1614, she's going to marry John Rolfe, and she's going to change her name to Rebecca Rolfe. Okay? She'll return to England with him in March of 1617, and she'll be the belle of the ball, right, of all social gatherings in England, which is probably a bad thing because she's going to fall ill, probably to some disease that she didn't have an immunity to, and she'll be dead by the age of 22. Okay? All right, so Jamestown's going to start to grow really quickly now that there's some profitable agriculture going on. And so by 1615, Jamestown is growing by leaps and bounds. So much so, in fact, by 1619, they're going to establish a form of Republican government. They're going to form the House of Burgesses, right? This is the first European-created democratic-style government in the New World, right? On July 30th, 1619, 22 burgesses or representatives will be selected by the 11 plantations. Suffrage is very limited. It's only the plantation owners that get to choose, right? But this is the same core that forms the House of Representatives of the state of Virginia today. So it's still going on to this day, right? Now, the Native Americans start to take notice. Now, like I said, remember initially I said they're not very impressed with the Jamestown settlers. Well, when the numbers eclipse 1,000 by 1622, they know that these Englishmen are not going away, and they keep encroaching more and more and more onto what they believe is their lands, right? So they decide we need to do something about it. In 1622, they are going to attack Jamestown, and it's going to be a massacre, right? 347 of the 1,000 settlers will be killed in this massive Native American attack, right? Matter of fact, it's going to have such strong repercussions that in 1624, James I is going to revoke the charter and take royal control of the colonies, saying, hey, this company's not protecting my citizens, and so that means I have to do it. But regardless of who in charge, Jamestown is here to stay now, and Virginia is going to begin to grow. By 1750, there are 300,000 Englishmen in Virginia. And Virginia is notable for several achievements. First of all, permanence, right? It's the first permanent English settlement in the Americas. It's the first one that's going to last, right? Profitability. Not for the stockholding companies. They'll never pay a dividend to their investors, but individuals will find profitability through tobacco farming, right? And they're going to grow these large plantations, right? Representative government, right? Representation. They're going to form the first form of democratic style government in the New World. And then finally, unfortunately, slavery, right? The crops that they grow are large commercial crops requiring a lot of labor. And in 1619, the same year the House of Burgesses were formed, the first group of slaves were brought in by an English ship called the White Lion that was exchanged for goods. And you have your first 20, well, they were signed to indentured servitude contracts, but you have your first 20 slaves in Virginia. And slavery is going to become a standard here in the Americas, especially in the South where these commercial crops are grown.